Baladevaya Subhadra. Jaya Radha Vallabha Radha Vallabha Sri Radhe. Jaya Radha Vallabha Radha Vallabha Sri Radhe. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada. Ya Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Sri Sri Gauranitai ki jai, Janavani Subhadra ki jai, Sisi Radha Vallabha ki jai, Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for coming. So, continuing Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, recitation Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. Today is in the board is chapters, Canto 7, chapter 7, text 22nd. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naran Chaiva Narotaman Devi Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayanudhirajet Nasta Prajesu Vadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamai Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistike. Okay, reading Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 7, Text 22nd. Asto prakritaya proktas Traya eva hitat gunaha Vikarat sodasai charya Pumanikat samam vayat Asto prakritaya proktas Traya eva hitat gunaha Vikara sodasacharya Pumanikat samam vajat Samam vajat Asto prakritaya proktas Traya eva hitat gunaha Vikara sodasacharya Pumanikat samam vajat. Somebody would like to repeat, please? Asto prakritaya proktas Traya eva hitat gunaha Vikara sodasacharya Pumanika samam vajat. Asto prakritaya proktas Traya eva hitat gunaha Vikara Sudasacharya Pumanika Samam Bhajat. Ladies. Asto Prakritaya Proktas Traya Eva Hitat Gunaha Vikarada Sodasacharya Pumanikat Samam Bhajat. Translation word by word, if you can repeat, please. Asto 8. Prakritaya, material energies. Prokta, it is said. Trayat, 3. Eva, certainly. He, indeed. Tat guna, the modes of material energy. Vikaraha, transformation. Sodasa, 16. Acharya, by the authorities. Puman, the living entity. Eka, 1. Samambhajat, from conjunction. Translation. The Lord's 8 separate material energies, the 3 modes of material nature, and the 16 transformation, the 11 sense of the 5 gross material elements like earth and water. Within all this, the one spiritual soul exists as the observer. Therefore, all the great acharyas have concluded that the individual soul is conditioned by these material elements. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. It's a bit long, so I thought perhaps we can discuss in different installments, so in order to understand. So, as explained in previous verse, Yetreshu Dehesu Tadatma Yogar Adhyatma Vid Gramagatin Laveta. As a spiritual advanced person can understand how the spiritual particle exists within the body, and thus, by cultivating a spiritual knowledge, he can attain perfection in a spiritual life. This intelligent person, who is expert in finding the self within the body, must understand the 8 external energies which are listed in Bhagavad Gita 7:4. Bhumir apo nalo vayor Kam mano buddhir evacha ahankara iti jangme bingna prakritir astada. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these 8 comprise my separate material energies. Bhumi, earth, includes all the objects of sense perception. Rupa, form. Rasa, taste. Gandha, smell. Sabda, sound. And Sparsa, touch. Within the earth are the fragrance of roses, the taste of sweet fruit, whatever else we want. As stated in Śrīmad Bhāgavatam 1.10.4, Sarva Kama Duga Mahi, the earth, Mahi, contains all our requirements. Thus, the object of sense perception, all are present in Bhumi, or the earth. the gross material elements and the subtle material elements, mind, intelligence, and ahankara, false ego, constitute the total material energy. Within the total material energy, there are the three material modes of qualities. These qualities, sattva guna, raja guna, and tama guna, belong not to the soul, but to the material energy. It is because of the interaction of the three modes, of these three material modes of nature, that the five knowledge-gathering senses and the five working senses and their controller, the mind, are manifested. Then, according to the modes, the living entity gets the opportunity to perform different types of karma activities with different types of knowledge, thinking, feeling, and willing. Thus, the bodily machine begins to work. So at this point is a description of how the composition of the body and the interaction of the living entity is taking place. No? Krishna explains his 8 energies, but at the same time our experience of that is through the body. This is much detail. The description of this part of the creation is more detailed in the 3rd canto. Kapila Dev gives us detailed description how that takes place. And Prabhupada, in very brief ways, referring to how the modes of material nature, with the combination of false ego, is producing the creation of this, for example, the 5 senses for acquiring knowledge, and the 5 senses for working as well. He said, for example, the combination of false ego with the mode of goodness takes place do you know what is taking place by the combination of the false ego and the mode of goodness? Give birth to the mind. Then the combination of false ego with the mode of passion produce intelligence, and the combination of the false ego with the mode of ignorance produce the 5 senses of acquiring knowledge, and then the 5 senses of working senses. So it's in that way how this is taking place. Again, this is very much in detail described in the 3rd canto of Bhagavatam by Kapila Dev. So, and also quite interesting is said that because of the influence, also we already know about in Bhagavad Gita when Krishna explains how we are motivated to actions due to the influence of the 3 modes of material nature. So the quality of our thinking, our feeling, our willing, the knowledge also is quite directly influenced by the modes of material nature. This has all been properly analyzed in Sankhya Yoga by the great Acharya, especially by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, in his incarnation as Devahuti Putra Kapila. This is indicated here by the word Acharya. We need not follow anyone who is not an authorized Acharya. Acharyavam Purusho Veda. One can understand the truth fully when he has taken shelter of an expert Acharya. I consider this is quite important point. If we can analyze or discuss a little bit about this point, is, for example, if we are right now studying Prahlad Maharaj's teachings to his classmates. Previously, in previous chapter, we thought, we heard about Prahlad talking to his father, And he was talking about the spiritual knowledge that was kind of contradictory to the philosophy that Hiranyakashipu has, and we know the consequence of that. But at this point, it's another part of his preaching, his activities, a description of his knowledge when he teach directly to his classmates. So different approach, the same topic but in a different approach, because he is very much aware of the audience. And when he was trying to talk about this spiritual knowledge, his classmates were kids like him, intelligent in one side. They said, well, from where did you acquire this knowledge? They were very curious, because you are like us, so from where did you get this information, this knowledge? Because our teachers, they don't teach us that. So then is when Prahlad Maharaj talked about his story, what happened about his life experience, and he's telling them that because he has a special teacher, Narada Muni, is who, because of his grace, his blessings, his care, he received this knowledge. But it's not just, I was quite appreciated the way how Prahlad is mentioning, how he acquired this knowledge. Because he wasn't alone when he received the knowledge of from Narada Muni. He was with somebody else. Do you know? Do you remember? Callado, yeah. It was Callado and him both receiving knowledge from Narada Muni, but at the same time, it's the same knowledge, the same teacher, but the results are different. So I was questioning myself, what happened there? Because if we are here, all of us with the same knowledge, with even the same teacher, Prabhupada, but how the effect that in each one of us, if we can extrapolate the case of Prahlad Maharaj and Callado in our own life experience. Because we have also the authorized teacher, Prabhupada, a very pure advanced devotee, and the same knowledge, but each one of us we receive, and the effect of that knowledge in each one of us in our life is different. Perhaps we have the potential to be the same like Prahlad Maharaj. But what makes the difference in us? Do you have any understanding, any ideas? Why the difference? Even in this case, Prahlad Maharaj and Callado, and in our life, for example? Any suggestions? No ideas? The same teacher, Narada Muni, the same knowledge, but the results in the life of Prahlad is different compared to Callado's life, the approach, the effects in their consciousness. Why is that? Oh, that's right, definitely, that's true. That is the key point, the firm faith in the Guru. And Callado has her consciousness, her faith was in something else. Yeah, her husband. Yeah, I said that's quite important. That detail is very subtle, but it's important for all of us to analyze. The consciousness, the attitude, how we receive knowledge, has direct effect in our consciousness, the attitude how we have. And very nicely, Vedavisa Priya Maharaj, previous days, he gave the class about the importance of have firm faith when we receive knowledge, in the firm faith in the Acharya and the spiritual master. Because of that attitude, we are empowered to receive the knowledge. Because it's not just, okay, I'm listening, but if I have not the empowerment, because it's not just my ability to study, my ability to learn the Shastras, that will guarantee that it's success in my learning or acquiring transcendental knowledge. It's very important, another factor, the empowerment and the blessings of the Acharya, of the teacher, the spiritual master. So to attract that mercy or the blessings, it's very important the attitude of the student. So quite reciprocal, that very important point. For example, he said that Kajadu, as Sivya nicely mentioned, her faith was more into her husband and the safety of her child. For that reason, she was there. But at the same time, she was trying to reciprocate with the protection that Narada Muni was providing because she was serving him. So she got some benefit. The Bhagavatam is not describing that yet, but because of the Bhagavatam and the teachings of the Shastras, we can understand by association of a pure devotee and rendering devotional service, there is a purification in the heart. So Kajadu got the purification, perhaps not at the same level, definitely not at the same level of Prahlad Maharaj, because she has a mixture in her intention. Her intention was trying to get also protection for her son, but at the same time she was meditating in her husband who, unfortunately for her, she wasn't pure devotee. He has opposite nature. So by meditating or meditating on him, somehow or another that contamination, also she acquired that contamination in her heart. That was a blockage that she has to not properly receive the blessings or the association of Narada Muni. So quite important that point. In us as a practitioners of Krishna consciousness, trying to follow this process, if we don't have the proper, or if we don't align our consciousness with the purpose of this process and trying to maintain the right attitude, so we will struggle, because at the same time, for example, we have material desires. When we start practicing a spiritual process, we come with mixture of desires in our heart. Because we are afflicted, perhaps suffering in material life, we want to ask for Krishna's blessings or relief from our suffering. But all those things, all those material desires are blocked for us to receive the blessings or the proper effect of the association with a pure devotee and the effect of transcendental knowledge in our heart. So I thought that it would be interesting for us to reflect upon and perhaps even try to see how we can create a balance, because those desires of those motivations that we hold in ourselves when we approach to a spiritual process is basically because we are not clear in the understanding about who we are. And it's why, for example, Prahlad Maharaj at this point, he's starting the teachings to his classmate. He goes straight away to the first instruction that he is telling them is the importance to understand our real nature. And he's doing it through Sankhya, understanding that the composition of the body and the difference of the body and the difference of the spiritual soul. That's the very beginning. From the very beginning, he started mentioning about it, and this is the third or fourth text, the same point. Understanding that, like yesterday, nicely, Jana Ram Prabhu explained the text about the different coverings of the body and the mind, gold mind, and the gold actually is the soul. And the mind, many elements on the mind, but we need to have expertise to identify the goal. So that is for us, to understand the present of the spiritual soul, we need the proper knowledge. And that comes through the association of the pure devotee or the bona fide spiritual master who can give us that knowledge, that understanding. So now, for example, continuing that to the teaching of Prahlad Maharaj, continuing that same point, he said, for example, now by understanding the difference between the body and the spiritual soul, let's go deeper. What is the difference? What is, for example, it said the body has changes, experience changes. But the spiritual soul doesn't experience those changes. So he's going a bit deeper. The difference between the body and the soul changes, and the spiritual soul is permanent. So, wow, that is a good point. And how these changes take place, so that is the description now, this point. Different compositions, the elements in the body. So, at this point, Prahlad Maharaj is explaining that, and it's quite interesting for us also to understand, because our main problem is the materially, bodily conception of life. We are still identified with our body, but we have the theoretical understanding, I'm a spiritual soul, I have a body. But when something happens to the body, we feel affected. Personally, that is my situation. I'm still affected. I was today, when I was reading, trying to prepare for the class, I said, what can I talk about it? Because my realization is very low, minimum at this point, because yes, I understand that I am a spiritual soul. I have the body, but whatever happened in my interaction with devotees, even or in the temple, in my devotional service, is based in even my body, my abilities, so-called my abilities. But because again, that identification with the body, who I am and what is mine, it's very strong. So what is the hope for me to realize my real identity as a spiritual soul and act upon that? I would say at this point very, very low, depending on my own capacity. So I don't know if you, probably in your case it's a little bit better. Many of you are kids growing with a knowledge, spiritual knowledge from the very beginning, but I thought it would be nice if we can explore a bit that what actually means to understand and realize our real identity as spiritual souls and acting upon that, if it's possible, if it's feasible at this stage, and how that can be a possibility for us, how can be realized. So in that way, I thought, okay, maybe the good way to appreciate that and have faith, because it's part of the process, is to understand that yes, we are a spiritual soul, but the uncovering or realizing that I'm a spiritual soul doesn't depend on me, because the material energy of Krishna is so powerful that even Krishna says the illusory energy of Krishna, it's very difficult to overcome. So why I'm not able to realize that I'm a spiritual soul and acting upon that is because I'm still covered, I'm still under the influence of the material energy of the Lord. So how can I get rid of that so to live my real identity? The only way how can be then is possible is by the help of Krishna, the controller of these energies. And he gave us different means and processes, ways how we can do it. So the fact that we have access to spiritual knowledge, teachers, is the way how Krishna is helping us to awaken, to get free from those coverings, by constantly doing it, that is a constant work, because I was trying to compare my personal experience, consciousness years ago, perhaps some decades ago, and 10 years ago, and this point, I would say there is not the same when I started Krishna consciousness and how I feel now. There is some points, some realizations. So it means that the process works. So the same way, if we keep practicing with more sincerity, with awareness, what are the obstacles that can block the effect or the power of the process, the shastras of the acharyas, that we will solve are putting those blocks. How we can work on that and eradicate that and accelerate the effect of the shastras and the acharyas, this transcendental knowledge, in helping us to awaken our consciousness, real consciousness. And interesting that Prahlad Maharaj, from the very beginning, is emphasizing this point to his classmates. We need to understand that we are not the body, we are a spiritual soul, and there is practical evidence about it. The transformation of the body, how it's subjected, and the experience that we have of ourselves internally. My body is changing, but I feel the same, I'm the same person. But it's a different experience that we have, but quite important to be conscious of that. So again, the importance how Krishna directly is organizing or is providing us the means for us to overcome the covering of the material energy, the three modes of nature, the illusory energy of Krishna. He is facilitating the ways. There is one verse of in the 10th canto when Uddhava, in the conversation with Krishna, he was telling Krishna how his devotee can overcome the illusory energy of Krishna. And for me, it's a hope, because definitely I acknowledge that at this point in my life, it's very challenging, it's very difficult for me to work rely on my own strength to overcome the illusory energy of Krishna. And see, I'm able at this point to see that how far away I am from what the real goal of life is. Because honestly, understanding my condition, I have to acknowledge that I'm still influenced by the modes of ignorance, sometimes passion and identifying with my body, the achings of my body, getting so it's affecting a lot of things. So how far of realizing I'm a spiritual soul, eternal, full of knowledge, happiness, and in my relationship with Krishna all the way, it's there, and it's very far away to realize that at this point for me. But as I said, there is hope. Like Uddhava says, Uddhava said to Krishna, well, because I think this is 11, sorry, I have written here, the text is quite interesting. Yeah, 11:646. Uddhava said, well, I'll repeat in Sanskrit. Tvajo pavukta sraganda vaso lankara charchita utishta vogyadas vojino dasas tava majajojenahi. The translation is, simply by decorating ourselves with the garlands, fragrance, oils, clothes, and ornaments that you have already enjoyed, and by eating the remnants of your meals, we, your servants, will indeed conquer your illusory energy. So that was, wow, that is great. It's hope. What we are already doing here. We all take Krishna Prasad, we smell the flowers that Krishna we offer to Krishna, we wear the garlands, the garlands that have been offered to Krishna. So now it makes sense, because personally I don't like to wear garlands, but now I have purpose to do it. So, and also, because by doing this, because of Krishna's mercy, it's not anymore these elements of material, because they become spiritual. By contact, in connection with Krishna and these elements that have been offered, so our consciousness also gets purified. Krishna is arranging many ways for us to be qualified, be uplifted our consciousness. So it's not depending of our endeavor to get success in spiritual life. It is one of the prerequisites to endeavor, but it's not enough, and it's Krishna who does the other part, even more of the work, that is arranging different ways for us to eventually get qualified. So I'll continue with the purpose. The living entity is individual, but the body is a composition of many material elements. This is proved by the fact that as soon as the living entity quit the combination of material elements, it becomes a mere conglomeration of matter. Matter is qualitative one, and the spiritual soul is qualitative one with the Supreme. The Supreme is one, and the individual soul is one. But the individual soul is understood to be the master of the individual combination of material energy, whereas the Supreme Lord is the controller of the total material energy. The living entity is master of this particular body, and according to his activities, he is subjected to different types of pain and pleasure. However, although the Supreme Person, the Paramatma, is also one, he is present as an individual in all the different bodies. So quite important to understand this aspect too. But it was the living entity, the soul, is the controller of the body. It's the only realm, the area that has control, because Krishna, as the spiritual soul, he has control of everything. So it's another way to understand also our identity as a spiritual soul, the difference between us and the Supreme Soul, Krishna. What is quite important to understand, because Prabhupada, in the first part of this paragraph, explained that the spiritual soul and the Supreme Soul is one. But at the same time, he is explaining the difference about the capacity. The spiritual soul has only influence in the body that it has been given. But Krishna, the Super Soul, he has influence in the totality, the whole material energy. But yesterday also, I like the way how Jagannath Prabhu mentioned that it's important for us to be aware, have awareness of, in our body there are other living entities as well. So actually who has the preeminent control of the body, the spiritual soul. But we have many bodies inside, many living entities. So even in that way we can see our area of influence is much limited also. Well, then the material energy is in fact divided in 24 elements. The individual soul is the owner of the individual body, and is a 25th subject, and above everything is Lord Vishnu as Paramatma, the Supreme Controller, who is the 26th element, or 26th subject. When one understands all these 26 subjects, he becomes a Adhyatmavid, an expert in understanding the distinction between matter and spirit. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 13.3, Kshetra Kshetra Gyayor Jnanam, understanding of the Kshetra, the constitution of the body, and of the individual soul, and the super soul constitute real jnana, or knowledge. Unless one ultimately understands that the Supreme Lord is eternally related with the individual soul, one's knowledge is imperfect. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7.19. Bahunanjang manam te jnanavang mam prapadyate Vasudeva sarvaiti samahatma sudurlava. After many births and death, he who is actually in knowledge surrendered unto me. Knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is, such a great soul is very rare. Everything, material and spiritual, consists of various energies of Vasudeva, to whom the individual soul, the spiritual part of the Supreme Lord, is subordinated. Upon understanding this perfect knowledge, one surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, Sarva iti Samahatma Sudurlava. So this is quite important point as well, because like Prahlad Maharaj, when it's important for us to understand Sambandha, Avideya, and Prajojana. So Prahlad Maharaj is starting his teaching through Sambandha, that means understanding who we are. And so Sankhya Yoga is assisting in this process, understanding the difference between body and spiritual soul, that will give him understanding who we are, or in this case, the classmates and us, understanding who we are as spiritual souls. But this is no independent knowledge, because this is very much connected with the source of all knowledge, that means Krishna. Understanding our identity, it will be is also very much direct linked understanding the existence of super soul, the source of our identity. But when I was reading this part, I was also trying to analyze why the difference between different schools of philosophy, transcendentalists, trying to understand the difference between the body and the spiritual soul, and why some of those some schools deviated to the impersonalism, because they also understand the difference between body and soul, and they also want to be free from this covering, from the influence of material nature. But the goal of them is a bit different. That freedom, that liberation is to be united with the Supreme Soul, to be one with God. But that is the beauty of being under the influence and the shelter of the bona fide spiritual master, that from the very beginning constantly emphasizes the difference of our nature and the difference that between us and God, and what is the relationship. About, for example, Prabhupada here, very clear, quite important, the word that he said, the individual soul, the spiritual soul, part of the Supreme Lord. So it's kind of, we can talk about the unity, like a spiritual transcendentalists, even impersonalists, are understanding and following. The living entity is part of the Supreme Soul. So for that reason, be one with God is the goal of light. But Prabhupada used the word, it said, this spiritual part of the Supreme Lord is subordinated. So that was like oh yes, that is quite important point. Subordinate, it's less, it's not one and similar with the same nature, the same potency. It's subordinate. That means there is something that is superior to that. Because subordination means you accept the superiority of something else, somebody else. So your individuality is there, but I submit myself to something that is superior. And this point is very subtle, but how Prabhupada from the very beginning is emphasizing, yeah, we are part of of Krishna, we are one in that as a nature, but we are subordinated. So, in that way, for example, that by having this clear, that also helps us to understand that the soul, or understand ourselves as a spiritual soul, but not just that. What is the dynamic? What is our function as a soul? How we can experience that spiritual nature of us in a more, in a fully way. How that can be experienced by the dynamic of our nature, expressed in a more active way. And that has to be with that aspect of being subordinated to somebody and who can be connected in a loving way. That reciprocation through devotion. And devotion basically is through love. Otherwise, it won't be maintained. So that is the only way how our identity as a spiritual soul can be expressed in a full way, dynamic. Because if we live our spirituality as a union with the Supreme Soul, that aspect, it's not expressed, has to be expressing ourselves in a more individual, dynamic way. It's movement and it's action. So that can be done only through loving devotional service. So that is one point that I wanted to mention about this part of the purpose. And in conclusion, we can say the importance that Prahlad Maharaj is starting his teaching from the clear understanding about the difference between the body and the spiritual soul. It's very important, this foundation clearly understood and experienced in ourselves to maintain a successful spiritual life. And Prahlad Maharaj, very wise, he is doing it. And this point, I'm not the body, I'm a spiritual soul. And based on that, every aspect of our philosophy, our practices will make sense. Okay, so at this point we can stop here. Any comment, any questions? No? Okay, so thank you so much for your attendance, your audience, and Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki Jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki Jai, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki.